A man can survive 1,000 failures, but there is one thing that quietly destroys a life: repeating the same mistake, while believing each time will be different. Most people never notice it happening. They simply call it fate. An ancient Buddhist story reveals why people repeat the same pain, the same failures, and the same regrets for a lifetime. There is an ancient tale whispered among wandering monks, a story so unsettling that many who heard it could not stop thinking about it for days. Not because it spoke about suffering, but because it revealed something far more disturbing. It suggested that the prison was never outside. The prison was inside the mind, and by the end of this story, you may never look at your own habits, relationships, regrets, or failures the same way again. Long ago, during a season of relentless rain, a young disciple approached the Buddha with a troubled heart. The forests surrounding the monastery dripped endlessly. Mist floated between the trees like wandering spirits. The earth had become soft and dark, carrying the scent of wet leaves and old roots. The disciple bowed. His eyes were exhausted, not from work, not from hunger, but from disappointment. Again and again, he had fallen into the same traps. Again and again, he had trusted the wrong people. Again and again, he had promised himself he would change. Yet every year felt strangely familiar. The same fears, the same mistakes, the same regrets. "Master," he asked, "why do I keep suffering from the same problems? Why does my life feel like a circle?" The Buddha studied him for a long moment. Then he said something unexpected. "Come with me." Without another word, he began walking into the forest. The disciple followed. The rain had stopped, but clouds still covered the sky. They walked for hours through twisting paths and dense trees until they reached a strange clearing. In the center stood an enormous stone well, ancient, silent, covered in moss. The Buddha stopped beside it. "Look inside." The disciple leaned over the edge. At first he saw only darkness, then gradually his eyes adjusted. Deep below he noticed something moving. A tiger. A massive tiger paced in circles at the bottom of the well. Round and round. Again. And again. And again. The disciple stepped back in surprise. "How long has it been trapped there?" The Buddha replied softly. "Many years." The young man looked again. The tiger was powerful, healthy, strong enough to kill, yet it never stopped walking the same path, the same circle, the same worn track. Its claws had carved grooves into the stone floor. Thousands of repetitions, thousands of identical steps. The disciple felt a strange sadness. What a terrible fate! The Buddha said nothing. Instead, he continued walking. The disciple followed deeper into the forest. As evening approached, they arrived at another clearing. This one contained no well, no cage, no walls, only open land stretching beneath the darkening sky. And there, Moving through the grass was another tiger, free, wild, untouched. Yet something felt wrong. The disciple watched carefully. The tiger moved in circles, just like the first one, around and around, following an invisible path. No cage surrounded it, no chains restrained it, yet it repeated the same pattern endlessly. The disciple felt a chill. Why does it move like that? The Buddha finally smiled. The first tiger was trapped by stone. He pointed toward the distant forest. The second tiger was trapped by memory. The disciple's heart sank. The wind moved through the grass. Neither spoke. Then the Buddha told him the rest of the story. Years earlier, the second tiger had also lived inside a cage. For so long it had paced the same circular path that the movement became part of its mind. Eventually, hunters released it. The cage disappeared. The walls vanished. Freedom arrived. But the tiger carried the cage within itself. Even in open land, it continued living as if the prison remained. The disciple stared at the animal. Suddenly, the sight became unbearable, because the tiger no longer looked like a tiger. It looked like people who remain in relationships that repeatedly break them, people who sabotage opportunities and call it bad luck, people who fear success because failure feels familiar, people who continue thinking thoughts that have wounded them for years, people who wake up each morning and unconsciously walk the same emotional circles. The tiger continued pacing. The sky darkened, and the disciple felt something inside him beginning to crack. But the Buddha was not finished. He knelt beside the grass and drew a circle in the soil. Most people believe their suffering comes from what happened to them. His finger traced the line again, and sometimes it does. He paused. But eventually something more dangerous occurs. The disciple listened carefully. We become attached to the identity created by our suffering. The words hung in the air, heavy, uncomfortable, because they carried an unsettling possibility. What if the problem is not merely the wound? What if the problem is that we have built a home around it? The disciple remembered every failure, every rejection, every humiliation, and he suddenly saw how each experience had quietly become part of his identity. He wasn't merely someone who had failed. He had become a person expecting failure. He wasn't merely someone betrayed. He had become someone expecting betrayal. The cage had entered his mind. The circle had become familiar, and familiarity often disguises itself as safety. Night settled over the forest. The moon appeared between the clouds. Its pale light illuminated the tiger still moving through the grass, round and round and round. Then came the moment the disciple would remember for the rest of his life. The Buddha picked up a small stone. Without warning, he threw it into the tiger's path. The tiger stopped. For the first time, completely still. The forest became silent. The disciple held his breath. The tiger stared at the stone, confused, as if waking from a dream. as if noticing its own behavior for the first time. A few seconds passed. Then the tiger turned and walked in a completely different direction, straight into the darkness, free. The disciple felt goosebumps rise across his skin. The Buddha looked at him. Awareness is the stone. Nothing else needed to be said. Years later, countless monks would repeat those words. Awareness is the stone. Not force, not punishment, not guilt. Awareness, because you cannot escape a prison you cannot see. And perhaps that is why so many people repeat the same mistakes. They search for new outcomes while protecting old patterns. They change cities but keep the same fears. Change jobs but keep the same beliefs. Change relationships but carry the same wounds. Change circumstances but preserve the same unconscious circle. The cage changes shape, the prison remains, and maybe right now there is a circle in your own life, a habit, a fear, a regret, a reaction, a story you keep telling yourself. Perhaps you've walked it so many times that it feels normal, natural, even inevitable. But what if it isn't? What if the walls disappeared long ago? What if the only thing keeping the pattern alive is the memory of the pattern itself? The tiger was never defeated by the cage. The cage simply taught it how to imprison itself. And that is the lesson hidden inside this ancient story. Freedom is not always about opening a door. Sometimes the door has already been open for years. The real challenge is noticing that you are still standing inside the room. So tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself one question. What circle have I mistaken for my destiny? Because the moment you truly see it, the moment awareness enters your path, the prison begins to disappear, and the life waiting beyond it may have been there all along.